So let's get right into it. On January 3rd, 2026, U.S. Special Forces did the unthinkable. They flew into Caracas and captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. This single act has just triggered a seismic shift. And in this explainer, we're going to break down what it means for oil markets, for investors, and for the entire geopolitical chessboard.
And make no mistake, this was not some quiet political maneuver. We're talking about what sources are calling a stunning display of force. A fleet of 150 aircraft, Delta Force on the ground, and a cyber attack that literally turned the lights off in the capital. The objective here was crystal clear and brutally efficient: decapitate the Maduro regime. So, how in the world did we get to this point? Well, the seeds were planted way back in 2020, when the U.S. laid the legal groundwork with an indictment for narco-terrorism. But the raid on January 3rd, that was the moment everything changed. And by the very next day, the U.S. wasn't just announcing a capture. Oh no, it was signaling to the entire world its plan to get involved in the future of the largest proven oil reserves on the planet.
Okay, so let's talk about the immediate fallout. The markets, as you can imagine, went haywire. But it wasn't a simple straight line up or down. We saw this fascinating tug of war between two powerful, opposing forces. You've got this massive split right down the middle of the market. On one hand, things look incredibly bullish. Anytime you have this much chaos in a major oil-producing nation, the geopolitical risk premium just skyrockets. But on the other hand, the market was already feeling pretty bearish. The IEA was forecasting a huge glut of oil, and OPEC Plus wasn't budging on production. And then there's the big one, the long-term shadow looming over everything. The idea that a US-backed Venezuela could one day bring millions of new barrels of oil back online.
Now, if you're a risk manager with exposure to U.S. Gulf Coast refiners, this is a 5-alarm fire on your desk. These facilities are specifically designed to process Venezuela's unique heavy, sour crude. Suddenly, their primary feedstock is gone. This is going to trigger a scramble for alternatives from places like Canada and Mexico, which means higher sourcing costs, higher freight costs, and that's going to hit their bottom line hard.
All right, beyond the initial chaos, we get to the billion-dollar question for investors. Is it even possible to rebuild Venezuela's shattered oil industry, and what would it cost? This right here is the heart of the dilemma, a massive opportunity wrapped in almost unbelievable risk. First, you have to wrap your head around this number. We're talking over $155 billion in defaulted external liabilities. This isn't just a hurdle, it's a mountain of debt you have to climb before you can even think about drilling a new well. It is, without a doubt, the first and biggest problem to solve. And even if you could wave a magic wand and fix the debt, you need cash, a lot of cash. Haley McCroft over at RBC Capital Markets, one of the sharpest analysts out there, estimates you'd need at least $10 billion a year, every year, just to start turning things around. That's an enormous commitment in a country this unstable. So how do you even begin to tackle this? Well, financial law experts have mapped out a pretty clever but super complex path. First, you need Venezuela to pass a new law to get all the creditors into one single orderly queue. Then, and this is the key part, you'd use something called Chapter 15 of the U.S. Bankruptcy Code. Think of it like getting an international restraining order that protects Venezuela's global assets, like its refinery company Citgo, from being seized by aggressive creditors trying to jump the line. It's a legal minefield, but it might be the only way to create enough stability to even talk about new investment. But let's be real, this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. Behind all these billions is the gritty reality on the ground. We're talking about rebuilding rusted-out pipelines, derelict refineries, and an oil workforce that has been absolutely decimated. Decades of neglect have turned the country's oil infrastructure into a ghost of what it once was. So, if you're an investment bank or a fund and you're analyzing this deal, the risks are just immense. You've got total political chaos with no clear leader in sight. You somehow have to find $80 to $100 billion just to get production back on its feet. You're facing a legal nightmare from angry creditors. And here's the ultimate irony. If you actually succeed, if you pour in all that money and effort and bring Venezuela back online, you might just unleash up to 3 million new barrels of oil a day onto the market, tanking the price of the very commodity you're trying to sell. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most important piece of this entire puzzle. The market swings and the financial risks are huge, yes, but the geopolitical fallout from this could fundamentally reshape the world order for decades. At its core, what we're watching is a head-on collision between two massive ideas. On one side, you have national sovereignty, the idea that has basically been the foundation of international law for centuries.
And on the other, you have the U.S. saying its legal indictment against a fugitive gives it the right to take action inside another country's borders. It's a clash of principles with enormous consequences. And that precedent sends shockwaves absolutely everywhere. For China, a key strategic energy partner is suddenly in play. For Russia and Iran, their biggest ally in the Western Hemisphere is gone, and a new red line has been drawn. For neighbors like Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil, they're suddenly looking over their shoulder, wondering, could we be next? And most fundamentally, the entire UN Charter's rules against the use of force are now being questioned.
You know, there's an old saying in foreign policy circles called the Pottery Barn Rule. You break it, you own it. By intervening so decisively, the United States may have just become the de facto owner of all of Venezuela's massive problems, from its economy to its politics to its humanitarian crisis.
So we're left with this critical, unsettling question. The military operation itself was a success. Maduro is in custody. The U.S. won the battle for Caracas. But in doing so, has it just kicked off a whole new kind of war? A war of uncertainty and unpredictable risk that markets will be forced to grapple with for years, maybe even decades to come.